I used to believe that love was enough, that if you just stayed loyal, stayed committed, and worked through the tough times, you'd be rewarded in the end. I guess that's what kept me going in my marriage for so long. 11 years. Lisa and I had been together for 11 years, and in all that time, I never once doubted her. Sure, we had our ups and downs, everyone does, right? Money was tight, and sometimes I didn't feel like I was enough for her, but I always thought we'd get through it together. I wanted to be next to a loyal, loving woman, and I believed I had found that in Lisa. I had this dream, that one day we'd be sitting on our porch, old and gray, watching the sunset, knowing we'd made it, through every argument, every challenge, happy until the end. It was my biggest fear to lose that, but I always told myself Lisa would never betray me. I never let myself entertain the thought that she'd cheat on me. I had doubts about a lot of things, but not that. Not her. But just sometimes I wonder. Maybe I saw the signs and just ignored them. Maybe deep down, I was too scared to admit it. I guess part of me was trying to hold on to this belief that things were as good as I thought. And the truth is, I didn't have much else. I didn't have the money, I didn't have the success, and I didn't feel like I had anything to offer outside of our marriage. I thought if I lost her, I'd lose everything. It all started with a conversation I didn't expect to have. One afternoon, I was out in the yard, minding my own business, when my neighbor John came over. John and I weren't close, just the usual wave across the fence kind of thing, but that day he seemed different, like he had something weighing on his mind. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Mike, I don't know how to tell you this, but I've been seeing Lisa around with some guy. It's been going on for a while now." At first I laughed it off. I thought he was mistaken or just trying to stir up some drama. "Lisa," I said. "Nah, there's no way." I couldn't even process what he was saying. I mean, Lisa and I, we had our issues, but she wouldn't do that. She couldn't. But John didn't back down. He looked at me, dead serious, and said, "I wouldn't be telling you this if I wasn't sure, Mike. I've seen them together more than once." My heart dropped. It was like my mind wanted to reject everything he was saying, but there was a part of me that couldn't. That was the moment I started to feel that doubt creep in. I couldn't shake it. Could he be right? I mean, I trusted Lisa, didn't I? 11 years together, and not once had I thought she was capable of something like this. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to second-guess everything. All the times she'd come home late from work, the sudden weekend plans with friends, the extra hours spent on her phone. Things I had brushed off before were now glaring at me like red flags I had been too blind to see. I couldn't even look John in the eye. I just nodded, thanked him for telling me, and walked back inside like a zombie. My head was spinning. Was it true? Was it possible that for over a year, an entire year, Lisa had been seeing someone else? I tried to convince myself that John was wrong. Maybe he misread the situation, maybe it was a coincidence, but deep down, something in me had already started to crack. I didn't want to believe it, but the doubt had planted itself, and from that moment on, it started to grow. After John dropped that bomb on me, I couldn't get it out of my head. Everywhere I looked, everything Lisa did, it all felt different, but I wasn't ready to accept it. I kept telling myself, "No, this isn't real. John's mistaken. There's no way Lisa could be having an affair." The thing is, you can't just flip a switch and stop trusting someone after 11 years. I didn't want to be that paranoid guy, the guy who suddenly suspects everything. That's not me. So I pushed it down, tried to act like everything was normal. But it wasn't. She'd get home late some nights, and before, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But now my mind would race. Where was she? Who was she with? Every text she sent, every smile she gave me, it all felt different, like there was something hiding behind it. I'd catch myself watching her more closely. Not in a way she'd notice, but I was looking for clues, some sort of sign that John was wrong. But the more I looked, the more the cracks started to show. Like when she'd take her phone with her everywhere. I mean, she used to leave it on the counter, no big deal, but now she'd have it glued to her hand. Still, I couldn't confront her. I wasn't ready. What if John was wrong? What if this was all in my head? I'd ruin everything by accusing her of something she didn't do. And then, what would that make me? So, I tried to ignore it. But you can't ignore something like that forever. It eats at you. I started to withdraw without even realizing it. I wasn't as talkative, wasn't as engaged. I'd sit next to her, but my mind was somewhere else, running through every conversation we'd had, every moment that didn't quite add up. And she noticed. Of course she noticed. "Is everything okay?" she asked me one night. "You've been quiet lately." What was I supposed to say? That I was starting to believe she might be cheating on me? That I was doubting everything I thought I knew about her? I just shook my head and mumbled something about work. She smiled, gave me a kiss, and for a second, I thought maybe I was being crazy, but that doubt, it was still there, growing. I couldn't shake it. I started checking little things when she wasn't looking. Her phone, her emails. I hated myself for it. I felt like a stranger in my own life, like I was sneaking around trying to catch her doing something wrong. But there was nothing, at least nothing obvious. I wanted so badly for this all to be a misunderstanding. I wanted to prove to myself that John was wrong, that Lisa was the woman I thought she was. But I couldn't. I just couldn't shake that feeling in my gut, that something wasn't right. And that's the worst part, the not knowing. The constant battle between trust and doubt. You start questioning everything, every moment, every look, every word. It was driving me insane, but I still wasn't ready to face the truth. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't even the thought of Lisa with someone else. That was bad, don't get me wrong, but it was what it did to me, to how I saw myself. I'd look in the mirror and I'd see nothing. Just this empty shell of a man who couldn't even keep his own wife happy. I mean, what kind of husband was I? I started thinking back, wondering if maybe it was my fault. Maybe I didn't give her enough attention. Maybe I wasn't there for her like I should have been. I'd always known I wasn't the richest guy. I wasn't some high-flying executive with a fancy car or a big house. Lisa used to say she didn't care about that stuff. But maybe she was lying. Maybe she needed someone who could give her more. And I couldn't. I could barely keep up with the bills most months. What if she was looking for someone who could give her the life she deserved, the life I never could? And then there was my confidence, or what was left of it. I started to feel like I'd failed, not just as a husband, but as a man. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't successful enough. And I wasn't enough for her. I started spiraling, you know? Every time I saw her smile or laugh, I'd wonder if she was thinking about him, whoever he was. Was he younger, stronger, better looking? Did he have the money, the charm, the life I never had? I couldn't compete with that. And that's the thing. Once you start doubting yourself like that, it's hard to stop. Everything feels like a competition, but I didn't even know who I was competing with. Was it some guy she met at work, some old fling, or someone I didn't even know existed until now? All I knew was I was losing, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt myself slipping. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep. My mind was a mess. Every little thing became a reminder of how I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or successful enough to keep my own wife from straying. I'd look at her across the room, and this wave of anger and sadness would hit me. She was supposed to be my partner, my equal. But here I was, feeling like I was at the bottom of some deep, dark hole. And she was out there, God knows where, with God knows who. It was like everything I had built, our life, our marriage, our future, it was all crumbling around me. And I couldn't stop it. I didn't even know where to start. I'd replay it all in my head. Every time she looked at me, every time we talked about our future, every time she kissed me goodnight. How could I have missed it? How could I have been so blind? It made me question everything. About her, about us, but mostly about me. And that's the part that destroyed me the most. The affair, it was like a knife to the heart, but the real damage? That was done long before I could even confront her. It was done to me, to how I saw myself. Because the truth was, I didn't see myself anymore. I wasn't the man I thought I was, and that hurt more than anything. I couldn't take it anymore. The doubt, the fear, the way it gnawed at me every single day. I had to know the truth. I had to confront her. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because she came home late again, like she had been more often lately, and there was something different about her. She seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else, or with someone else. I sat there on the couch, my hands clenched into fists, heart pounding in my chest. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head 100 times, but when she walked through the door, it all went out the window. Every word I wanted to say was stuck in my throat. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to say something. But she didn't. She just smiled, like everything was normal. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Lisa, we need to talk." I saw her freeze, just for a split second, but it was enough, that tiny moment of hesitation. Like she knew what was coming, and I knew, in that moment, that everything John had said was true. She was guilty. She was hiding something. She tried to play it off at first. "What's wrong, Michael? You've been acting strange lately." Acting strange? Me? I felt like I was losing my mind, and she wanted to act like it was all in my head. I didn't even ease into it. I just blurted it out. "Are you cheating on me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa just stared at me, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she couldn't believe I had asked her that. And then for a moment, she tried to laugh it off. "Michael, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous." But it wasn't ridiculous, not anymore. I wasn't going to let her brush it off like that, not after everything. "John saw you," I said, my voice low but shaking with anger. "He saw you with someone else, more than once." The color drained from her face. I could see it. She knew the game was up. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. That was it. There was no denying it now. And that's when the tears came. Not mine. "Heron, I'm sorry, Michael," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I expected. Some grand explanation, a reason that would make it all make sense. But there was none." She stood there, tears streaming down her face, telling me she didn't mean it, that it just happened. "How long?" I asked. My voice was cold now, detached, like I was on autopilot. She hesitated again. That was the worst part. Even in that moment, she was still trying to protect herself. "A year," she finally admitted. "A year." My mind stopped right there. A year. I couldn't even process it. For an entire year, she had been lying to me, smiling at me, kissing me, while sneaking around behind my back. I couldn't look at her anymore. I stood up, my whole body shaking. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just said the only thing I could. "Why?" She tried to explain. Something about how she felt, like we had drifted apart. how she didn't feel appreciated, how she didn't mean for it to go so far, but it didn't matter. None of it mattered. I felt like everything was collapsing around me. The woman I had trusted more than anything. The life we had built together. It was all crumbling right there in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. And the worst part? A part of me still wanted to fix it. A part of me, deep down, wanted to forgive her, to somehow make it all go away. But I couldn't. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. "I need some air," I muttered, and without waiting for a response, I walked out. I don't even remember where I went. I just walked. I just needed to get away from her. Away from the lies. Away from everything. I thought walking away would give me some relief, some time to breathe. But it didn't. If anything, it made everything worse. I felt like I was suffocating, like the weight of everything was crashing down on me all at once. I wandered around the neighborhood that night, my mind spinning in a million different directions. I kept thinking, how did I get here? How did we get here? Everything we had built over the past 11 years, gone, just like that. I tried to make sense of it, tried to understand how the woman I had trusted with my entire life could betray me like this. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there were no answers, no explanation that would ever make it okay. And the pain? God, the pain was unbearable. It was like my heart had been ripped out of my chest, and no matter how hard I tried to push it down, it kept coming back, stronger each time. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about them. The images of her with someone else played on a loop in my head, over and over. I barely slept that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her face. I'd hear her voice, and then the tears would come. I wasn't someone who cried easily, but that night, I couldn't hold it back anymore. I felt broken, completely and utterly broken. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the loss of everything I thought we had, the loss of the future we were supposed to have together. I had spent so many years building this life with her, and now it was gone. All of it, just gone. And then the questions started. Questions I didn't want to ask, but couldn't stop from creeping in. Was this my fault? Could I have done something different? Was I not enough for her? Was there something I missed along the way? Something that pushed her away? I kept thinking, maybe if I had just been better, worked harder, been more present, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe she wouldn't have looked for someone else. But the truth is, I didn't know anymore. I didn't know anything. All I knew was that the woman I loved, the woman I had given everything to, had torn my world apart. And now I was left picking up the pieces, trying to figure out how to keep going when all I wanted to do was disappear. It felt like I was trapped in this dark, endless tunnel, and there was no light at the end, just pain. And I didn't know if I'd ever come out of it. In the days that followed, I was a wreck. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. All I could do was replay everything in my head, what she said, what I felt, the betrayal, the hurt. It was like my mind was stuck in this endless loop, and I couldn't find my way out. And then, the questions started haunting me. Should I stay or should I leave? It sounds so simple when you say it out loud, doesn't it? Stay and try to rebuild, or walk away and start over. But when you've been with someone for as long as we were together, it's never that simple. We had a life together, history, memories, 11 years. You don't just throw that away, no matter how bad it gets. But then again, how do you stay after something like that? I kept thinking, maybe we could fix it. Maybe we could go to therapy, talk it out, work through it like we had with every other problem before. I mean, couples survive affairs all the time, right? Maybe we could be one of those couples. Maybe I could find a way to forgive her. But every time I tried to imagine a future where we stayed together, that image of her with someone else would flash in my mind. It was like a knife twisting in my gut. How could I ever look at her the same way again? How could I ever trust her again? But leaving meant throwing everything away. It meant walking away from the woman I had loved for over a decade. It meant starting over. And that terrified me. I wasn't young anymore. I didn't have the energy for this. The thought of rebuilding my life from scratch, it just seemed too overwhelming. I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to do it. And a part of me, maybe the part that still loved her, didn't want to. I was stuck, completely stuck. Every time I thought I had made up my mind, the doubt would creep back in. One moment, I was ready to pack my bags and walk out the door, and the next, I was convincing myself to give her another chance. I kept hoping for some sign, some clarity, something that would tell me what to do. But that's the thing about betrayal. There are no easy answers, no right choices, only pain. And no matter what I decided, I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. It wasn't just about staying or leaving, it was about rebuilding my life either way, and I didn't know if I had it in me. After days of being trapped in my own head, I realized I couldn't do this alone anymore. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of all this chaos. So I reached out to the people closest to me, my family, my friends. The first person I called was my brother, Mark. We hadn't been super close lately, but he's always been the one I could count on when things got tough. I didn't even know how to start the conversation, so I just blurted it all out. How Lisa had been cheating on me for over a year, how I didn't know if I should stay or leave. He was quiet at first, just listening, which I appreciated, and then he said something I didn't expect. "Mike, I don't think anyone can tell you what to do here. You have to figure out what you're willing to live with. But if it were me, I'd walk. You deserve better." It hit me hard. Hearing someone else say that, it made it all feel more real, like maybe leaving really was the right answer. But still, I wasn't sure. I needed more perspective. So, I reached out to a couple of my closest friends. They had different takes. One of them told me I should try to work it out, that love was worth fighting for, that Lisa and I had built too much to just throw it all away. "People make mistakes," he said. "If you still love her, maybe you can get through this together." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But every time I thought about forgiving her, it felt like I was betraying myself, like I was giving up my dignity just to keep the peace. And then there was my mom. God, she was furious when I told her. She was ready to drive over to Lisa's place and give her a piece of her mind. "You don't deserve this, Michael," she said. "No one does. If she could do this to you, she doesn't deserve you." I appreciated their advice, but the truth was, no one could really tell me what to do. This was my life, my marriage, and no one else knew what it felt like to be in my shoes. But talking to them helped. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, even if I still didn't have all the answers. It gave me the strength to start thinking about what I needed, not what everyone else thought I should do. And that's when I realized I needed time. Time to figure out if I could ever forgive her. Time to decide if I could live with what she had done. But most of all, time to figure out who I was without her. After talking to everyone, I realized something. No one could fix this for me. No amount of advice, no words of comfort. None of it could make the pain go away. It was up to me. I had to decide how to move forward, and I had to do it on my own terms. So, I took a step back. I stopped trying to figure it all out right away. I needed space. Space from Lisa. Space from the constant spiral of thoughts. Space from everything. It wasn't about running away. It was about giving myself the time and distance I needed to breathe. I started focusing on myself for the first time in a long time. I took walks, long ones, hours of just walking and thinking. It was like I was trying to clear out all the noise in my head and find some sort of peace in the silence. It didn't happen overnight. There were days when I felt like I was barely holding on. But little by little, I started to feel lighter. I knew I couldn't just sit with the pain forever. So I decided to see a therapist. I wasn't sure what to expect at first. I thought maybe talking to a stranger would feel weird, but it wasn't like that at all. It felt like a weight had been lifted just by saying everything out loud to someone who wasn't directly involved in my life. Someone who could listen without judgment. In those sessions, I started to unpack everything. My insecurities, my fears, all the self-doubt I'd been carrying for years. I realized that Lisa's betrayal had amplified feelings I'd been holding inside for a long time. The affair wasn't the only thing that had hurt me. It was my own view of myself. I had spent years believing I wasn't enough, and that belief had broken me long before Lisa's affair came to light. Slowly, I began to rebuild. Not the marriage, but myself. I started focusing on what made me feel good again, whether it was spending time with friends, diving into old hobbies, or just learning to enjoy the simple things. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd lost along the way. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. There were days I still woke up feeling empty, still haunted by the memories of what happened. But those days became fewer and farther between. And the more I worked on myself, the more I started to feel like maybe I didn't need to make a decision right away. Maybe healing was the first step, and the rest would follow in its own time. I began to see that I was stronger than I thought, that maybe, just maybe, I could get through this, not because of anyone else's advice, but because I was finally learning to trust myself again. And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe that I could be happy again. It's funny how life works sometimes. You think you've hit rock bottom, that there's no way out of the darkness, and then, out of nowhere, something or someone comes along. Someone who makes you realize that maybe there's more to life than the pain you've been drowning in. For me, that someone was Emily. We met by chance, at a coffee shop of all places. I wasn't looking for anything. In fact, the last thing on my mind was starting a relationship. I was just trying to get through the day, minding my own business, when we started talking. Just casual, friendly conversation, nothing big. But there was something about her, something calming, something real. At first, I kept my guard up. I wasn't ready to trust anyone again. After what Lisa had done, the idea of opening up to someone, of letting someone get close to me, it terrified me. But Emily wasn't like anyone I had met before. She didn't push. She didn't try to fix me or dig into my past. She just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe around someone. We started meeting up more, just as friends at first. We'd grab coffee, talk about life. Nothing serious. I didn't tell her everything at once. I couldn't. But little by little, I found myself sharing more. Not just about Lisa, but about me. About the parts of me I was still trying to rebuild. Emily had her own story, her own pain. She wasn't perfect, and I think that's what made her feel so real. There was no judgment, no pressure. She had been through her own struggles, and somehow, it made me feel like I wasn't alone in mine. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but there was something about Emily that made me want to take a chance. It wasn't easy. Every time I started to feel something, that little voice in the back of my head would remind me of what happened before. What if this was just another mistake? What if I was setting myself up for more heartbreak? But Emily was patient. She didn't rush me. She didn't ask for anything more than I was ready to give. And slowly, I started to realize maybe not everyone was like Lisa. Maybe not every woman would betray me. Maybe there were still good people out there. People who could be trusted. It wasn't some grand romantic movie moment. There were no fireworks, no dramatic declarations of love. It was simple, quiet, real, and maybe that's exactly what I needed. Something that wasn't built on the past, but on the possibility of a future. With Emily, I started to believe that maybe I could let someone in again. Maybe I could trust again. And for the first time since everything with Lisa, I felt hope. Hope that I could be happy. Hope that life could be more than just the pain of the past. It's strange to think about where I was just a short time ago. The pain, the heartbreak, it felt like it would never end, like I'd never find my way out of that darkness. But now I can look back and see how far I've come. Emily didn't save me, and I think that's what I appreciate most about her. She didn't try to fix me, didn't try to erase the past. She just walked with me through it. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was broken. With her, I've found something I didn't think was possible. A new kind of happiness. It's not the fairy tale kind of happiness I used to dream about. It's different. It's real. It's honest. And it's mine. I've learned that happiness doesn't come from pretending everything is perfect or holding on to some idealized version of life. It comes from accepting where you are, who you are, and knowing that no matter how messy or painful the journey has been, you can still find joy. I never thought I'd be here, standing on the other side of all that pain. But I am, and I'm stronger for it. I've learned that happiness isn't about finding someone else to complete you. It's about finding peace within yourself. And then, if you're lucky, meeting someone who complements that peace. Emily and I, we're good. We're taking things slow, building something real, and it feels right. It feels like I'm exactly where I need to be. I never thought I'd say this, but in some strange way, I'm thankful for everything that happened. Not because it was easy, not because it didn't hurt, but because it forced me to grow, to face the parts of myself I had been running from for so long. And now, for the first time in a long time, I feel free, free from the past, free from the fear, free to be happy again. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I'm ready for it, and that's enough.